Shalom, this is Shira Sherbow coming to you from Tzvat, Israel, and I want to welcome you to our Torah for the Nations online women's gathering. I think you'd be happy to know that there are 4 times in our Torah that there were people having, I guess, what we would call an emotional crisis. So that's why we titled this week, Have You Had Your Meltdown Yet? Because, I don't know, it comforted me when I was listening to a teaching by Jonathan Sachs, how we can tell in our Torah that there were individuals that were having, I don't know if you call it an existential crisis, an emotional crisis. I kind of used the slang and just said a meltdown because we all know what that is. And so, you know how we talk about in our Torah how every single space, last week we talked about how there was a small letter A and everything has meaning. And there's something that's used 4 times in the Torah, and one of those times is this week. So if you've had an emotional crisis this week, it's in the air, it's in our Torah this week. So I was going to tell you the 4 times in our Torah that people had an emotional crisis and how we can tell. There is a little mark, and it's called a shalshelet. Shalshelet. It's actually in Wikipedia. I looked it up. But it's a little mark, and it looks like a squiggly chain. And it even says in Wikipedia it's only used 4 times. I don't know if it said Torah or Bible, but it's used 4 times, so it's very rare. And 3 of the times are in Genesis, and then 1 time this week in Leviticus. Okay, so I'll tell you the 4 different emotional crises that happen in our Torah. See, the Torah was meant to be sung. The Torah is like a song. So I guess what it was when they would see this little mark over the word, it was an indicator maybe to sing in a certain way, but we're supposed to recognize that the person is going through a great inner turmoil. Okay, so the first time we see it is in Genesis 19:16, and that's the story. I know y'all know the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. So the story goes that, Abraham and Sarah, they left their land and they took Sarah's brother with them. Her brother's name was Lot. And then so Lot and Abraham and Sarah, they're all related. Abraham is Lot's brother-in-law. He's also his uncle. So they're all family, and they're all together. They all leave their homeland together, and they all become very wealthy. And at one point, though, there's arguments going on between Abraham's workers and Lot's workers, and so they decide to separate. So Lot lives in the land of Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham finds out from God that God is about to destroy the city. So I don't know how much time Lot had, if he was given, an hour, if he was given 15 minutes, if he was given 5 minutes, but he was told, here he is, his whole life, he's been building up a fortune, and he's planning his life, he's planning his future, and he finds out that everything's about to change, that everyone in his city is about to die. And if he wants to get out, he's going to get out with the shirt on his back. He's got to leave, and he's got to leave now. So you can imagine what that would do to your mind. You see what's going on with us in the world when you see your world just all of a sudden change. Well, his was very dramatic. He was told everything in your world is about to change, very quickly, and you got to move, and you got to move now, and get your wife, get your kids, and go. And he's going to go to a cave. And so here he is, he's the judge, he's sitting at the gates, he has a nice life, he's rich, he thinks he's got a great future, he's been building his riches for his whole life, and all of a sudden in 1 minute, it's over. So he hesitates. This is what it says. I'll read you what Jonathan Sachs said about this. He says, the first instance occurs in the story of Lot. Lot had separated from his uncle Abraham and settled in Sodom. There he had assimilated into the local population. His daughters had married local men. He himself sat in the city gate, a sign that he had been made a judge. The 2 visitors came to tell him to leave. God was about to destroy the city, yet Lot hesitates. And above the word for hesitates, vayitamama, he is one of those shalashelets. Okay? This means that he's torn, he's conflicted, he senses that the visitors are right, and the city is indeed about to be destroyed, but he has invested his whole future in the new identity he has been carving out for himself and his daughters. And had the angels not seized him and taken him to safety, he would have delayed until it was too late. Okay, so that's the first emotional crisis, and we can see how that would be pretty hard to deal with. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one occurs with Abraham's servant. Abraham has a servant named Eliezer. And Eliezer is like Abraham's right-hand man, like forever. And it looks like, Abraham's rich, and it looks like when Abraham dies for the longest time, since Abraham doesn't have any children, it looks like Abraham is going to pass everything to Eliezer. Well, then Abraham has Isaac. And the Midrash says, that Eliezer, what made the most sense to him was that Isaac's wife would be one of Eliezer's daughters or granddaughters, or someone in Eliezer's family, and that way the wealth of Abraham would still go to Eliezer. But Abraham sends Eliezer on a mission to go to his relatives and find a wife for Isaac. So you can see how he would be torn. If he's successful, he loses out on this inheritance. The inheritance totally goes to Isaac and Isaac's children. So he's very torn with his, is he just Abraham's servant, and he needs to remember that he's just a servant, and he needs to be loyal and do what Abraham says, or, but he wanted to be more than a servant, he wanted to be an heir. So this was very, very hard on him. Okay, so it says that, if Eliezer succeeded in his mission, this is in Genesis 15:2 is the story, and he brought back a wife for Isaac, and if the couple had children, then his chances of one day acquiring Abraham's wealth would disappear completely. So 2 instincts warred within him: loyalty to Abraham and his personal ambition. The loyalty won, but not without a deep struggle. Hence the shalashelet, that little symbol. I just have to talk about, each of us, if you have left Christianity, if you are a Noahide, we all had a personal crisis. We all know what that's like, to find out that everything you've ever believed is, like fool's gold. Something you thought you had a diamond and you had a cubic zirconian, or you thought, you find out that this inheritance that you were given from your parents and your grandparents is all made up. And that brings a crisis. And it's more of a crisis when the people around you, the people that you love and the people that you're closest to, they seem to look right at the same facts that you look at, and you see it and they don't. And you realize that you have to walk away. And we all know, we all have pretty much the same story of what that's like when we start to uncover the truth about what our inheritance from our forefathers. But right now, I'm thankful because we're going through this, and yes, this is a crisis, but I think we've handled crisis before, and we made it through, and we'll make it through this. And I feel very thankful that at this time that we are connected to the one true God. very thankful for that. And I'm very thankful for all of you that have come out, and that all of us that have already gone through our emotional crisis. We can handle this. We can get through this. Even though it's hard, it does comfort me to see that these other people in our Torah had these gut-wrenching emotional crisis times in their life, and they made it through, and they made it to the other side. The third time in Genesis is in the story of Joseph, and I'll just read you what Jonathan Sachs says. He said, sold by his brothers as a slave, Joseph is now working in the house of an eminent Egyptian Potiphar, and he's left alone in the house with his master's wife. He finds himself the object of her desire. He is handsome. She wants him to sleep with her, and he refuses. To do such a thing, he says, would be to betray his master, her husband. It would be a sin against God. Yet over the word he refused is this shalshelet. It's in 39:8, Genesis 39:8, indicating, as some rabbinic sources, commentary suggests, that he did so at the cost of considerable effort. He nearly succumbed. This was more than the usual conflict between sin and temptation. It was a conflict of identity. Recall that Joseph was now living in, for him, a new and a strange land, and his brothers had rejected him, and they made it clear that they did not want him as part of the family. So you can see where the temptation would be so great. Why then should he not in Egypt do as the Egyptians do? Why not yield to his master's wife if that's what she wanted? The question for Joseph was not just, is this right, but also, am I an Egyptian or a Jew? So we see by this little mark in the story of Joseph that Joseph was having an emotional crisis at this time with this woman. So he says all three episodes are about inner conflict, and all three are about identity. There are times when each of us has to decide not just what shall I do, but what kind of person shall I be. Okay, so now we come to this week in our Torah portion. And you know, we already know that Moses was the most humble man that ever walked the earth. So I was very curious to find out, well, what kind of emotional crisis did Moses go through? Because if you just read it, you don't see anything, you can't tell. But Moses was helping was preparing his brother, Aaron, was going to become a high priest. And of course he was happy for Aaron, but the high priest, the Cohen, they passed things down to their children by birth. And there are Cohens on the earth today. We have personal friends that are Cohens. They're from the family of Aaron. And so Moses had his role, like the prophet, the leader, but he was not the high priest, and nothing he did was passed down to his children. And that was, I'll read to you what that says. So that is Moses' inner struggle conveyed by the Shalit. He is about to induct his brother into an office he himself will never hold. Okay? He says, Aaron will have a privilege that Moses will be denied, namely, seeing his children and their descendants inherit his role. The son of a priest is a priest. The son of a prophet is rarely a prophet. Okay? So he says, what all four stories tell us is that there comes a time for each of us when we must make an ultimate decision as to who we are. We've all done that, right? It is a moment of existential truth. Lot is a Hebrew, not a citizen of Sodom. Eleazar is Abraham's servant, not his heir. Joseph is Jacob's son, not an Egyptian of easygoing morals. Moses is a prophet and not a priest. To say yes to who we are, we have to have the courage to say no to who we are not. There is pain and conflict involved. That is the meaning of the shalshelet. But we emerge less conflicted than we were before. And I think you all understand this too. It's very hard going through it, but when you get to the other side, it's like you have clarity and you're less conflicted. So this applies especially to leaders, which is why the case of Moses in our parsha, in this week's parsha, is so important. There were things that Moses was not destined to do. He would not become a priest. That task fell to Aaron. He would not lead the people across the Jordan. That was Joshua's role. Moses had to accept both facts with good grace if he was to be honest with himself. And great leaders must be honest with themselves if they are to be honest with those that they lead. A leader should never try to be all things to all men and women. A leader should be content with what he or she is. A leader must have the strength to know what he or she cannot be if he's to have the courage to be himself. And every single one of us has had the courage to be our true self. We've had the courage to walk away from the lifestyle that we were raised in, and it did cause a crisis. Remember it well. But I wanted to tell you some of the wise things that I've been listening to that our rabbis are saying about this time that we're in right now. This coronavirus thing. Our wisest man, this is from a really good teaching from Manis Friedman. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's one of my favorite teachers. And I'll tell you some of the highlights of what he said. It's great. He said that our wisest man, King Solomon, he said, I'm sure you've heard this, there's a song that says, turn, turn. For everything there's a time and a season. And it actually says a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. So here we are. And he says, when the season is over, the thing is over. So we're in this season, and this too shall pass. All things come and go. Everything has their time limit. All right, so it's just good to, know it has a season. And I think it's, he said it's very interesting. Of course, it's not a coincidence that this time is between Purim and Pesach on the Jewish calendar. And so at the time of Purim was a time of redemption and salvation. And of course, we were saved from Haman's decree. In the time of Passover, we're saved from Pharaoh. So both times, so this is like the best time. It's like, as far as mazel goes, good fortune goes, this is the season. So it's right in the middle of two salvations, right in the middle of Purim and Passover. So it says, he's talking about life in America, what we used to call life. Life was going to work, life was going to school, going to restaurants, sports events, nightclubs, entertainment, and all of a sudden it's all shut down, but yet we still have a life. So now we're forced to think about, are all those things really essential? Because, I still have a life without them. And so Passover is a time to come out of our enslavements. And he says, because of this virus, all of these enslavements have come to a sudden halt. And so now we realize that real life is at home. And so our real life, he said, has been neglected for a long time. So now we're forced. There's a lot of jokes on the internet about, being stuck home with the kids, and we're going to come up with the cure before the scientists do. And one of the things I also heard in a teaching by Jonathan Sachs, he pointed out, with all these jokes that are on the internet, it's really comic relief. They're really like some good, I'm thankful for all the humor out there. Jonathan Sachs says that what we laugh at, we can survive. And what we laugh at, doesn't hold us captive. And he also reminded us that Abraham and Sarah were told to name their son Isaac laughter, or he will laugh. And really, in Isaac's life, there wasn't much to laugh at. But we see that it was for his descendants. It was for us. It was probably for this time, because we're getting a lot of humor to help us get through this time. And it's so funny, because I'll be in the house, I'll be trying to think, oh, I have all this time, I'm going to get all this stuff done. And my husband will be in front of the computer, and I'll hear him start laughing. I mean, it goes on all day. And I want to know what he's laughing at. So it's like 10 times a day, I'm like stopping. I'm like, what's so funny? And he shows me, and it's just one thing after the other. Like, they're just hilarious, what people put up on the internet. And so, anyway, what a mixture of emotions this is, to be like the unknown and what's out there, and the grief that we feel for all the people that are suffering, and just such a mixture. So now back to what Manus Friedman said. He said real life is at home. He says we're going to be changed forever. We're being sobered, we're being given wisdom, and we're being liberated. And hopefully we will never go back to the way it was. He says it's going to be a whole new world, and we're going to see life differently. So also he said, there's good and bad bacteria, and there's good and bad cholesterol. But he said this virus, it's only bad. And he said it takes life. It's dead, and it takes life. And so it has to be replaced with life. So the virus represents a lack of life, so what we have to do is become more alive. And here we have a l'chaim. We're always saying to life, l'chaim. So we have to, he said that was the way that we fight this thing that is pure death. We have to become more alive. And then he was saying, what do we learn from Purim, the Purim story, when Mordecai said to Esther, okay, the Jews are going to be fine, but you've been the queen for 10 years, kind of undercover, not telling anybody who your family is. And that line, for such a time as this season, this is like, it seems obvious, like this is what you came into the world for. This is, the purpose of your season will not be fulfilled. So it's like this one piece of the puzzle, this thing that you came down to earth to do, and each of us came down here to do something. And how do we know that we weren't born to be part of this time right now, that we're supposed to look around and say, how can I help? Who needs me? What am I supposed to be doing? Like, he was telling Esther, like, if this is your moment, like, you don't want to blow it. So we learned from Purim that everything happens for a reason. Esther became the queen, and she became the queen to have her moment, to have her piece of the puzzle, to do what she was here to do. So each of us has to do that. He says the greater the threat, the greater the positivity has to be. And so we have this time to be useful. And so one of the things he says that we thought all the things that would give us success, it's not necessary. And so it's time to rethink everything. And right now, the best side of humanity is being shown, because as we are self-isolating, we're doing it to protect others. So that's a beautiful thing, that humanity is being given an opportunity that just by staying home, we're actually doing a mitzvah. We're actually doing something for our fellow man, every single second. So it's actually a great opportunity for us to elevate our lives. Every second, we're doing something for someone else. So that's one way, to see it. So for a time like this, our souls came down to earth. We are discovering what life is really all about. And he says, nothing happens by accident. Everything has a meaning. And more than that, now here's the part that I really like the best. I think everything has a positive meaning. And when we respond to that, we really come alive. He says, come alive is what we need to do. When there is a virus that seeks to draw life out, this is how we have to understand the enemy. Our response to life taking things is to become more alive. We fight the darkness with light, and we fight lifeless with life. So what does life mean? Life means mindfulness, purpose, goodness, going out of our way, doing the right thing without an ulterior motive. And the good news is now we are ready for the Mashiach to come. And it's like he says again, it's not an accident. This happened at this time at Purim and Pesach. And because this is the whole message of Purim and Pesach, that before our Mashiach comes, he's talking about that the Midrash talks about that there's going to be a war, the Gog and Magog war. And people are saying, well, did it already happen? Is it about to come? But there's also something in our Midrash that says that it's not necessarily a military war. And it actually says we could be fighting a plague. And this forces us to become more alive. So when we come out of this final battle, we're ready for Mashiach. So we're going to open up a Zoom room and put the link up there, and you can come in and, we can just talk about, just have a place, just have some girl time, just have a place to talk, to vent, to ask questions. And so we thought the best time to do it would be just right after this, so it'll be like 3 o'clock Eastern time. And you'll see a link. And this, I've never done my own Zoom room before, so I hope everything works good. And I hope to see you there. And Angela and I are going to be there. And we thought of doing this last week. We talked, and I give a teaching, but we don't have a lot of like back and forth time. And so this will be a time where we can just talk. And you can let me know if you want to keep doing this, if this is the best time to do it, or if there's a better time. Like time has kind of become freed up now. So anyway, I love you guys, and I hope y'all stay well. And I hope you just tap into this mentality that for everything there's a season, and that it's not going to be forever, and that everything has meaning, and there are no coincidences, and everything has positive meaning. And so that helps us just to see that something we're being prepared, the world is being prepared for the Mashiach. And that's good, and that's what we've been wanting. Okay, so I hope to see you in a little while in the Zoom room. And many, many blessings. Shalom, peace from Israel. Bye for now.